and not just believing what I saw. I tried to rationalize it, but whatever came to mind, I couldn't. It was real. I had just seen strange beings that were roaming around in the pasture. H knew this as well, but was taking it a bit better than me. He was walking in long strides towards where V had parked her car, intent on waiting there until they got back. I wanted to call out to my friends, but despite what had happened, didn't want Chris to find us and have us in trouble. All I could do was stare at the fog in the field and hope they were okay. I tried the next best thing, calling them. The phone rang and rang several times before getting a pre-recorded message that a connection couldn't be established. Determined, I tried again, but the call dropped. I looked at my phone in frustration to see that there was no signal. H stopped in his tracks about 2 seconds after a short skidded halt. Even if he was trying to hurry too much, something was wrong. I didn't notice it immediately, but it set in. The car or road wasn't there. The barn was there, but it looked very worn. A lot more than what I had seen it. And I swore it had sheet metal. This one had wood planks, and that made up the wall. The grass was a lot taller too, about waist height. What the heck happened? Were the first words out of my mouth. H looked around frantically, his flashlight beam shined around. Nothing modern's here, including Chris's house. He motioned with his flashlight over to a patch 100 yards away where the old man's house was supposed to be. I wasn't liking what this sounded like. No phone signal, no car, no road. Did we enter some realm or dimension that was different from our normal world? If things couldn't get worse, they did. H's light went out suddenly. I gave a quick shriek in alarm. The darkness instantly sapped whatever bravery I had. My lantern LED almost went out, dimming to the glow befitting a firefly. It was foolish of me to think that this would end so easily. We were now in almost complete darkness, the sky having barely any starlight above us. I don't want to lose track of H, and I could have used some consolation myself, so I pulled myself from holding his hand, latching onto his arm instead. He was fiddling with his flashlight to see what was wrong. Weird. I know the batteries were good, the thing just quit. He was knocking it against his palm, trying to use my light to see what was wrong. I heard something in the grass. Fearing more of the forms, I grasped his arm tighter, trying to get his attention. He heard it as well, both of us frozen in place to see what would happen. There was no place to run, and we were at a loss at what to do. The noise seemed to circle us, staying about several feet away from us at all times. Scared was an understatement. I heard H exhale deeply, raising his non-functioning flashlight towards the noise. I was never so happy to see light, but what I saw immediately after made me almost wet myself. Something cat-like looked back at us, almost the size of a person. When the light shone on it, 2 red-orange eyes glared back at us. It stood up, yes, stood up. Having something like a human body but with slender limbs, it hissed at us, looking directly at me before leaping towards us. Both of us tumbled onto the ground as I felt H push me over. I was sobbing again, eyes shut closed and afraid to get up. A sudden buzzing caused me to yelp, realizing it was my phone. H was trying to help me to my feet, patting my back and telling me it'll be alright. With tear-filled vision, I saw the road back, V's car, the modern barn. 2 random lights danced towards us, realizing they were people behind them. They were V and R. "Are you guys okay?" V sounded shaky. "Let's just get out of here, please." "Glad you came to that conclusion." H had already pulled the car door open as my friend and her brother got in. As soon as I was in, he bounded in and they drove off, skidding gravel and revving off into the night. There was a silence in the car for a few minutes as we winded down lonely country roads. Finally, V spoke up. "What the hell happened in the field?" She still sounded shaken up. "Something," H answered. He was jerking a bit and shivering in shock. His hand wandered across the seat to mine. The stint was over, and at this point I didn't want to carry on the girlfriend charade anymore, but I felt sorry for him, honestly. I'd only gotten a glimpse at a fraction of what he was able to see, and that made me not want to sleep. I could only imagine what was going through his mind. I actually refused his hand, sliding over to the center of the back seat and wrapping my arms around him instead. As his friend and what I had indirectly caused, it was the best I could do to make it up to him. We're going on as usual when we suddenly didn't see you guys, R explained. You vanished into thin air. We thought you guys were playing a joke on us, and we started to see some sort of mist rising from the ground. Then we saw you at the car, V added on. It was weird. How did you get to the car so quickly? So we started back and I stopped recording. We heard you scream and started running over. I can't explain it. I tried my best to explain what exactly happened right after the mist. H was shaking, so I stopped where things were touching me, asking R to turn on the heat a little. They were graves, H said in a hoarse whisper. I trembled in fear briefly. H looked at me, silently crying unlike my boo-hooing earlier. His face reflected the dim green glow of the bright interior lights from the car. What? I asked, giving him a gentle squeeze to repeat what he said. They were graves on the ground, he repeated. That's why I was walking zigzags. You didn't see them? I felt mortified, if not eerie. He had seen something that was not physically visible to me. I bit my lip and shook my head, feeling like the stereotypical clueless girl at this point. Shush, it's okay, I told him. We're not going back there. I continued my story until I was found. H seemed to be reacting as if he was reliving the experience all over again, so I suggested that when we got into town, we grab him a coffee or something hot to get him out of his shock. R looked back at him. Don't think coffee's gonna cut it, I. We better drive him back to your place. What? I had no intention of getting into trouble for trespassing. The last thing I wanted to do was that. This was just simple holiday tomfoolery. Or what it was supposed to be until this happened. I was silently cursing H inside. He saw serious shit. He needs more help than just caffeine. Alright, fine, I begrudgingly replied. Off to my house it is. When we drove up to the farmhouse where I lived, my mom was waiting on the porch as we got out of the car. She was all smiles until she saw me guiding H out of the car, realizing something was wrong. She looked us over. What in tarnation did you do to this fella? I had a bit of a southern accent, but my mom's was a lot more pronounced. V told her something quietly as she ushered all of us into the house, yelling for my grandma to make hot cocoa in a hurry. I led H over to our couch and sat him down, taking a fleece blanket and wrapping it around him. My mom came in the room, a shot glass of liquor as she coaxed H to drink it. Sitting down, she leaned a bit over. Now mind telling me what all this is about, I? Well, V insisted us go look for ghosts. I started to explain, so we went to the Chris's field up in Greene County. My mom flipped out and started to lecture us about trespassing. However, R seemed to have taken a change of tone upon seeing how H was affected. He was countering her about how it was their fault, and H didn't want to get wrapped up in this when my grandma came in the room, having heard everything from the kitchen. One look at H and a distant look came on her face. You saw him, didn't you? H looked up at her as the room fell quiet and everyone looked at Grandma. Meemaw, what are you going on about? Hush, Louise. She looked straight at H. She gave him the cup, going to sit on the rocker in the corner. She was quiet for a moment. You're all lucky you're back in this house tonight, she began. Not everyone walks up to Chris's field and comes back. My mom was at a loss for words, staring at my grandma. H coughed. What happened? So she told us. About the 1850s, there was a conjuring woman who had come up from Louisiana, living out in those remote areas, apart from everyone else. No one knew who she was, or what her name was. But bushwhackers were prevalent in that time. Bandits. A group had raided her place, had their way with her, and then killed her. They were looting her stuff and decided to stay there that night instead of clearing out. It wasn't clear what happened, but something killed the bandits that night, except one who barely escaped with his life and died 2 days later. He was delirious about a devil spirit that was in the house who was living with the woman. That was left at that. The Civil War happened across that portion of the state and lots of people died. A small skirmish of a few hundred men took place where Chris's field was, and many of the soldiers had been buried in the general vicinity. As things ended and years went on, people reported seeing things, namely shadows moving in the field as wispy pillars. Some claimed to have even seen monstrous, hideous things trying to cling to him to escape. But there would be those that would claim to see the spirit, always chasing them down for their soul. It would roam the field, imprisoning and feeding the souls that rested there. The farmers in that area wanted a solution and called a reverend to pray over the land. The sightings became significantly less and even rare, but the spirit wouldn't leave, rooting itself there from its former mistress. "Even old Chris never saw anything really," Grandma remarked. "But I heard them stories from friends that I had who'd seen the huskers in that field. One girl, godly Christian woman, bless her heart, saw the whole field full of yellow eyes one night." H was silent, focused on the story. We were all quiet, giving her the chance to speak. "So you young'uns were lucky tonight. Heaven forbid you say what you saw out here. Mr. Fine and Mr. Handsome got a taste of what it's worth." H wiped his eyes. "I think what shakes me up is I saw it. Not just them. It." Grandma's eyes widened. "Oh, good lordy!" Her hand went to her chest, raising to her feet. Her breath rate had increased as my mom tried to calm her down. It's all right. My grandma was beginning to calm herself down. "I'll have Horace drive you home. Oh, do you mind helping?" Details were starting to get hammered out in that minute of how to get H home, as they deemed him unsafe to drive. Grandma led me away towards the kitchen. "Darling, I gotta tell you this before your mama comes in here and pushes me aside." She took my arm. "That boy saved you tonight." "Mima, what are you talking about?" "I, middle name." Yes, the stereotypical Southern Skolin involves whatever middle names you have. "Nobody sees hell and is unfazed. That boy of yours got a glimpse of something so deathly he'll probably not sleep, and for what I know about that place, you're lucky. You really are." He's not my boy," I corrected her, almost brushing aside what she told me. Yes, the story was creepy, but to me, the affair was over. "He ought to be. He knew this whole thing was gonna happen. You saw him too, didn't you?" She grabbed my arm harder. "Didn't you?" I nodded silently, feeling my skin grow cold at her words. "What?" She said in a low voice. "Whoever sees that devil's spirit and lives to tell about it was warned about it beforehand, not by name or story, but by visions." She let go, stepping back with a knowing look and letting me leave. I bolted out of the kitchen, finding V&R outside waiting for Horace, my dad, to arrive to drive H's car back home. I found H still on the couch in the blanket, staring straight ahead. When he saw me, he looked relieved. My grandma was right. He knew something was wrong somehow. H didn't know local lore as we did, having not grown up here. But he was so hesitant, and if I didn't guilt trip him for his weakness of how he felt about me, he would have been safe at home. I sat down next to him, put an arm around him, and resting my other hand around his wrist to massage it. "How did you know?" "Do you want an honest answer to that question?" he asked. I blinked. I did. I sighed deeply and nodded. "You seemed to know something was up and coming. Grandma also mentioned it." He breathed deeply. "My religion is not Christian-like, but not Baptist. We believe that demons and such roam the night, especially on Halloween. Going out after sunset is inviting trouble, like walking into a freeway." "But you obviously came out with me earlier and seemed fine walking around with me around town. Even if it was night, what gives?" H shook his head, another tear falling. It seemed that this was his way to cope and face his fear. At least he was shouldering it. Something happened. A dream. About 2 or 3 days ago, I saw you in the outfit in some cow pasture. I saw myself there too. It was dark. I'm asking you what the heck we're doing out there, oblivious to anything that was going on. His body spasmed suddenly, a good shiver going through him, causing me to jump. He mouthed a sorry. Then, this thing like the Enderman from Minecraft comes up from behind you, grabs you and disappears. He shuddered again. I couldn't get it. I've seen those things and played before, but didn't know what that was doing in my dream or even scaring me. But how? It had red and orange eyes, and it hissed its words at me. My blood could have stopped. It would have. Words? H nodded. I gripped him tightly, trying to gain a semblance of myself. What did it say? He looked at me with that worn face of his, a look that pierced my chest and made my heart tremor. It wanted your soul.